In the series of Tokyo Ghoul, there exists a predator to humanity, a carnivorous humanoid species referred to as the Ghoul. Due to the existence of the Ghoul, humanity would create the Commission of Counter-Ghoul, in other words, the CCG. This is a government-sponsored organization that employs Ghoul investigators to eliminate all of Ghoul kind. In this organization, there will be many ranks to classify the level of mission and danger that an individual investigator can undertake. And at the peak of these ranks, we have the Special Investigator. Special Investigators are usually extremely powerful combatants who are tasked with hunting down or repelling some of the most powerful ghouls in existence. And in this video, I'll be ranking and explaining all of the Special Investigators that Tokyo Ghoul has to offer. With that said, if you enjoy content such as this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and now, let's get into it. To begin, to make sure this list is fair and is not confusing, I'll be using all characters who were once special class investigators, even if they abandoned the organization. So characters such as Amon will be on the list. Not only this, Bureau investigators and directors of the CCG will also have a place on the list since they're equal or above to special class investigators while dictating the CCG. It wouldn't make sense to have a list going over the most powerful investigators and leave out two of the best in history. Now to begin, we have Itsuki Marude. Marude is a pretty unique inclusion on the list as he's not really a combatant or anything of that nature, and he primarily handles a lot of the strategy and planning when it comes to combating Ghoul kind. The man is a special class investigator, but the only time we see him really fight is when he saves Uri from Furuta and manages to repel Furuta using his weaponry. Despite that, there's not much home to write about when it comes to his overall power. Marude is one of those super strict yet caring mentor kind of characters. The way he connects his subordinates is similar to Nanami from Jujutsu Kaisen. He can seem to be a pretty mean person at first, but deep down, he's very kind. Marude throughout the series just commands majority of the operations in Tokyo Ghoul, but he eventually comes to find out the true nature of the CCG and the Washu clan through his own investigation. This displays his intelligence because everybody else found out about V through information being leaked directly to them. At the end of the story, Marude survives everything and continues his life as a special class peacekeeper for the TSC. Matsuri Washu is another character who spends most of his time overseeing operations and handling the tactical aspects of major battles. However, compared to Marude, Matsuri's methods of completing missions are way more ruthless and cruel, as he's typically willing to throw away lives and sacrifice anybody to get the job done. I'm sure from this, you know that he's not the best person ever. Matsuri eventually turns heel and becomes a better person as the Washu clan falls apart, an assassination attempt by V is made on him, and with him never really liking his family in the first place. He just took the opportunity and decided to work with Marude to defeat V, Furuta, and everybody else working with them. He ends the story by joining the TSC to make the world a better place, but also, he divorces his wife and changes his name so he can never have any children, and by proxy, ending the Washu. Also, we've seen Matsuri fight a little bit in the series, and that little bit was really impressive. He was able to take down a bunch of V agents toward the latter half of the series. These V agents are also half ghouls and have amazing swordplay. So Matsuri taking down all of these guys suggests that his swordplay is among the best. Not only this, with him being a Washu, he's a half ghoul with all of their benefits except the abilities like Kagune. He has the regeneration and super strength. We even see that at one point, Matsuri had an entire blade sticking through his head and he just did not care. He's a powerful and competent guy, we just don't see much from him and he doesn't even have a kaneki. Kyoko Ora is the first woman to ever achieve the status of special grade investigator. And not only this, she is the one who taught Arima how to dual wield kaneki. She also seems to be a very kind and gentle person outside of battle, and her name literally means pure peace. At the end of the story, she ends up staying with the CCG and leading their combat branch. Sadly, she seems to be busy with other stuff throughout the entire series all the way up until the raid on Kokle arc, and this arc would conclude with Kaneki off-screening her so bad that she would lose her legs and never return to the battlefield again. She's primarily a combatant for the CCG, has tons of experience, and apparently was able to handle her missions and investigations with no problem until she would actually appear in an arc. So she's clearly powerful. Ora also has an extremely powerful rocket launcher kaneki named Zebisu that allows her to shoot homing missiles into her opponents, and she can change his form to work as dual blades that she's clearly good at using. It took the one-eyed king Kaneki to put her down for good, so again, she's certainly strong. It's just that she's down here because she doesn't have much screen time or feats. Unlike Aura, Mugen is a character we get to see fight more than once in the series of Tokyo Ghoul. He's a very flamboyant guy who displays a lot of passion in almost everything he does. He's like Might Guy from Naruto if he were in Tokyo Ghoul. Not only this, but he hates ghouls to a point where he'll refer to them as monkeys. Despite that, he works alongside the ghouls to defeat V in the final arc and retires from doing anything ghoul related to become a monk at the very end of the series. He was raised in a temple as a child, so it makes sense. Mugen being a special class investigator obviously makes him quite powerful, and he sports one of the most unique Quinqué in the series. This is a double S rated cannon that he can use to launch massive energy blasts toward any of his opponents. Mugen is a pretty big dude, so he's able to swing the weapon around and wield it as if it's a tiny little blade. He was also able to defeat Enji Koma, who's a double S rated ghoul without much difficulty, this feat reinforcing his danger level as a special class investigator. We just don't see him get into any major fights after this except for when Kaneki beats him down easily. After Mugen, we have Hoji. Hoji was a pretty confident and calm man who was respected by pretty much everybody in the CCG. He also has a lot of history with Tatara of Aogiri Tree, as he is the man who exterminated Tatara's brother and turned him into a weapon. Hoji was also Sato's mentor before he'd be turned into a ghoul and go missing in the final chapters of the original Tokyo Ghoul. After missing for a couple of years, Sato would reappear and eliminate Tatara before Hoji's eyes as a form of revenge toward the ghoul and to impress his former mentor. But Hoji, seeing what his student has become and being restricted by the laws of the CCG, would order everybody to attack Sato, this causing Sato to lash out and eradicate every investigator present, including Hoji, ending his story there. Despite being a bureau investigator, Hoji is well known for defeating many ghouls in China and has battled many extremely powerful ghouls on screen, such as the One-Eyed Owl alongside a bunch of other characters at the end of the original series, and he was also able to handle his own against Tatara up until Sato would interrupt their fight. Tatara himself being a double S rated ghoul and one of the most powerful ghouls in all of Aogiri. Not only this, but Sato would even admit in chapter 171 of Re that Hoji wasn't supposed to lose to him, this implying that he had been more powerful than Sato was at the time of the Rue Island arc, and he only really lost because, you know, his feelings toward his former protege. Hoji also uses two Quinqué in his final battle in the series. First is Chi-She, which seems to be a double S rated massive curved greatsword that Hoji is somehow able to wield pretty well. And then Iitsu, which is a pair of gauntlets with blades attached to them that allow Hoji to move with a lot more agility than Chi-She can provide. Overall, Hoji lands up here because it's more than implied that he can hang on the higher end of the double S ratings. Iwao Kuroiwa is a pretty prominent combatant from the original series, as he's one of the two investigators who will always appear to fight Yoshimura, the non-killing owl. As for Tokyo Ghoul Ri, we don't get too much of him until the final arc of the series. He's a pretty stoic person in almost every situation. Even when he lost his arm against the owl many years ago, he had no reaction to it. Thanks to the anime, everybody actually thinks he passed away in his battle against Roma alongside Uri, when in reality, he comes back in the final chapter of the manga and continues to work as a peacekeeper. Kuroiwa is a physical monster of a human being, as his son Takeomi is already able to fight against ghouls with his physical strength alone. Mind you, he's certainly more powerful than his son. Kuroiwa at his peak usually utilized the Arata Quinqué armor, which was an auto-equipping Quinqué made by the Kakuja of an extremely powerful ghoul. This armor-like Quinqué would enhance its users' abilities to a point where they were able to match triple S rated ghouls. This does have a drawback of damaging its users the longer it's used. Think of it like Guts' Berserker armor. He also had a massive Quinqué shield that he'd use alongside the armor to both attack and defend, but it was nothing too special, just strong and reliable. After Kuroiwa, we have Shinohara, and honestly the spots of the two investigators are interchangeable, as they pretty much are equal and fought in perfect tandem whenever confronting the non-killing owl with all of their equipment. The invulnerable Shinohara was a fan favorite due to being a father figure-like character to Juzo Suzuya, who was severely misguided early on in the series. He was also pretty cool and reliable, while being one of those guys who'd sacrifice himself in order to save everyone else. Unlike Kuroiwa, Shinohara would be severely wounded in his battle against the One-Eyed Owl at the very end of the original series and be placed into a coma for majority of Re, only waking up on the final chapter. Shinohara also has his own Arata armor that's exactly the same as Kuroiwa's, meanwhile wielding the S-rank Quinqué that's referred to as the Demon Yamada. Unlike most kaneki, it doesn't have any special properties besides being a very powerful blade. Shinohara also boasts feats of being able to take on Yoshimura a couple of times, and even engage Kaneki in a Kakuja state completely solo, although he would lose that fight. Despite this, Shinohara is a legend, and Arata armor allows him to hang with some of the best. Kori Ui is a character who starts off as a Spider-Man type of investigator, where he's cracking jokes all the time even in the worst moments, and just trying to help everybody that he can. But as the story goes along and he loses many of his comrades and friends, he becomes an extremely ruthless person and even works alongside the corrupted CCG to see his goals through. Kori is also the protege of Arima and was even called the hope of the Arima squad at some point. Kori is a character with a pretty good list of feats, as even before Ri, he was able to hold his own against the One-Eyed Owl completely solo, which if I'm being honest, is the only reason he's up here. Combine this with the fact that he's got way more powerful by the end of Ri and was one of those characters that when he appeared he just could not be stopped. Kori typically uses his whip-like spear called the Taruhi with a ranking of A+. He also owns a double S ranked kaneki, but he never used it in the story. All in all, Kori just has too many moments of good feats and dominance that make me place him this high. Here, we move on to Mutsuki. Mutsuki is an extremely complex character who at first seems to be pretty relaxed and gentle, but reasonably has a lot of mental and emotional turmoil that takes a toll on her as the series progresses. We come to find out that Mutsuki even goes into extremely violent blackouts, but these do come to an end when she accepts who she is and outwardly expresses her cruelty onto other characters in the cast. Eventually, all of this is resolved by her former friends talking some sense into her and getting her to hear them out. Although this confrontation would save Mutsuki as much as she could possibly be saved, she would end up keeping her distance from everybody by the end of the series, as too much damage was done past a certain point. Mutsuki is a powerful character with all sorts of tools at her disposal. You'll see this as a trend for most characters on the list from here on out. First, Mutsuki is a Quinx, meaning that she was surgically modified to possess her own Kagune and have all other features of ghouls besides the need to eat humans. Mutsuki also has a tentacle like Kagune, but there's no point in getting into that as she eventually reveals that she's able to make her Kagune take any form that she pleases, making her an extremely flexible fighter. On top of this, Mutsuki possesses 3 different sets of kaneki knives, and the last one we see her use are 2 sets of 16 kaneki knives. In her fight against Toka, we see that she can juggle and throw these knives while displaying insane control with them. She was also able to hurt powerful characters such as Uri and Yomo, but the reason why she's so low despite everything she can do is because every battle she has against a high tier opponent, they can't or won't use their full power, and even under these circumstances, she loses every time. At last, we have reached the deuteragonist of Tokyo Ghoul Ri, Uri. Uri was a pretty unpopular character when the series was first being written, as he was a massive snake and was doing anything to get promoted. He even led his fellow Quinxes into danger many times, and sometimes he'd be doing this on purpose. But after Shirazu passes away against Noro, he undergoes a massive change as he acknowledges that he took all these people who cared for and loved him for granted. After this point, Uri becomes a lot like white-haired Kaneki, but way more sane, as he takes his missions way more seriously, does anything to protect the people that he has left, and deals with a lot of internal struggle. He's also the son of Mikito Uri, this being a special investigator who was responsible for the capture of Donato Popora, and one who sacrificed himself in a battle against the One-Eyed Owl. Now, I know Uri is an associate special class, but I think anybody who's read this series knows that he probably would have been promoted to special class had he defeated Roma, the Triple S Ghoul, at literally any other point in the series. There's nothing in the story that even acknowledges this insane feat, and I guess it makes sense as the dragon would appear in Tokyo soon after Uri defeated Roma. On top of this, he's also played a big role in defeating a couple of notable Double S ghouls, including Noro, this guy being a ghoul that the CCG could not defeat for years. He's got a really good track record, and one more impressive than majority of the special investigators in the series, arguably better than Kaneki, who was an investigator for a little longer than Uri was. So due to his resume, I'm boosting him up to special class, kind of like how I boosted a couple of ghouls up to Triple S on the ghoul list. Now, Uri is also a Quinx, which means that he's gonna have a pretty loaded set of abilities and equipment. First, He has a massive greatsword and shield like Kagune that allows him to take on anybody in the series, considering the fact that he was able to destroy a triple S Ghoul with it. On top of this, Uri also has one of the strongest kaneki in the series that was created from the Ghoul Noro. This blade, called Ginkui, is a double S blade, and it takes the form of a normal blade, but it can also extend itself into a massive tentacle with a mouth at the end of it to bite down and capture any of his enemies. We also see in his battle against Amon that he can throw his blade into somebody and use a remote activation feature in order to sprout out multiple tentacles and deal tons of damage to his opponents. Uri lands this high because he has an amazing track record throughout the series, and defeating a triple S Ghoul is a feat that only the Reapers and the directors of the CCG have managed to achieve. Kotaro Amon is the original deuteragonist of Tokyo Ghoul, and before Tokyo Ghoul started tackling the politics of its world and moving beyond the CCG and Aogiri as primary antagonists, this guy was the one who provided us with the perspective of the CCG and let us know that characters in this organization weren't completely evil. Amon is a character who's come to despise ghouls and work at the CCG due to his adoptive father Donato Popora taking in other children and eating them without his awareness. But once he met Kaneki, his belief that all ghouls are evil would slowly begin to change, and he'd have a lot of character development up until the final arc of the series, where he'd be captured by Aogiri and presumed to be dead by the CCG. Amon makes his return in Re as a one-eyed ghoul, and chooses to protect many characters in the shadows until he reveals himself. He soon gets captured by the CCG after this event, but Sato manages to free him and knock him back to his senses. This causes Amon to reconcile with Kaneki one last time before choosing to leave Tokyo, but he does come back for the final arc and to defeat his father Donato for good. For those wondering why Amon is on this list, it's because he became a special investigator after his participation in the Anteku raid in the final arc of the original series, although it was a posthumous reward. Amon did inherit Yoshimura's Kakuho when he was turned into a half-ghoul, so he does have access to a Kagune and Kakuja. In the current time, Amon mostly uses his Kagune to only cover and reinforce his Dojima Kaneki that he's owned since the original series. Talk about dedication. Amon also has two Kakuja forms that we only see him use one time each. The first is a massive beast-like form that looks a lot like Eto's Kakuja, and the second is a more humanoid beast-like state that resembles Yoshimura's Kakuja. They both seem to be equally powerful, as Amon had to restrain himself from defeating Uri and all of the Qs when they jump him, whereas with the second form, it was able to go head to head with Sato, who's certainly one of the most powerful characters in the series. Finding the peak of Amon's strength is pretty difficult, as he doesn't use his Kakuja much, and he manages to defeat Donato Popora with his Kagune only. Besides this, his battle history, feats, and accomplishments all land him up here. Suzuya is a special class investigator who was once an extreme problem child for the CCG, with a past so dense that this video cannot do it justice. Besides this, he'd be a pretty reckless and violent investigator for the CCG, and one that really couldn't be controlled. It's thanks to his talent and mentorship from Shinohara, he was able to round himself out, survive most of the crazy stuff he gets himself into, and become a model investigator for all to strive toward and respect. When Shinohara would enter a coma due to the Anteku raid, Suzuya would dedicate himself to progressing as an investigator and taking the job more seriously, as he even earned the title of the next Arima in the sequel series. Suzuya is one of those characters you can't help but feel proud of every time you see him, because his development is so well done. Suzuya ends his story as the Dragon General of the newly formed Tokyo Security Committee, and pretty much the best peacekeeper alive. Suzuya is a character with so much talent that the CCG did not feel the need for him to attend their academy and wanted him to get into the fray immediately. Suzuya was also so talented as a combatant that the CCG would create an Arata armor specifically made for him called the Arata Joker, which is mostly like the other Aratas, but it focuses more on speed than power due to Suzuya's slim build. Despite this, he was more than able to hold his own against all Kakujas it faced. Suzuya also has a scythe that is referred to as Jason that he uses when not using the armor, and carries 56 small blades in order to throw at his opponents and give himself a ranged option. Suzuya is so gifted in combat that you can probably give him anything and he can use it to his fullest capabilities. Suzuya lands himself all the way up here because he was able to combat Kaneki despite having some help. He was the #1 reason why everybody was able to survive the battle against V at the end of the series, and the story telling us multiple times that this is the only guy who can replace Arima. Keep in mind that Suzuya is a normal human. He wasn't a superhuman, half ghoul, half human, or anything like that like majority of the characters on the top of this list. He's just literally built different. Here, we enter the obvious and controversial top 2, and I'll be placing Furuta at the second spot. Furuta is the primary antagonist of all Tokyo Ghoul, and has such dominance over the story that he either completely screws over or leads every antagonistic force through manipulation or strength. Furuta is a man who suffered an unfair life without ever having a chance to say or do otherwise. Due to the nature of the Washu and the control they have over society, they get away with forcing Ghoul women to bear their children. And these children tend to have extremely short lifespans due to them being human with the superhuman genetics that being half Ghoul provides. It drains their life force at an accelerated rate in exchange for power. Furuta despising the Washu his entire life for taking away his right to live a normal life would cause so much chaos that he and the Washu's evil deeds can no longer be ignored. This is why Furuta's goal was super peace, as he associates peace with death, and he wanted to bring a death to the entire game of ghouls versus humans so people can acknowledge the bigger problem at hand. He manages to do just that, as the Washu are eradicated and both species begin to work together toward a brighter future at the end of the series. Note, this is just how I interpret this character, and Ishida left Furuta open-ended on purpose, so there's really no correct way to explain him. Furuta was also never named a special investigator, but being the director of the CCG at one point, he sits far above that rank, and that's good enough for me to be on this list. Furuta, like Kaneki, has Rize's Kakuho inside of him, so he's a ghoul. This allowing him to obtain her Kagune and eventually his own Kakuja, which takes the form of this alien-like being with one eye and multiple tentacles. Furuta is also said to be extremely good at swordsmanship, as even Arima was impressed with him when they were children, and he was raised in the Sunlit Garden as a half-human alongside Arima, so yeah, he's pretty good at combat even without his ghoul abilities. Furuta was also able to defeat Eto with his Kagune alone, and was able to force dragging Kaneki into using his Kakuja, but honestly, Kaneki stomped Furuta from there on out, and I think it goes without saying that Furuta is one of the strongest investigators, given his battle history and feats. Before we get into the obvious number 1 choice, we have to go over the honorable mentions. These are special class investigators who didn't do anything in the series, but they have the title, so we gotta go over them. Fujishige Iba is a character from before the events of the series. He was Shinohara's superior and more than likely played a mentor-like role for him. He was apparently present when Shinohara defeated the ghoul that gave him his Demon Yamada blade, and he has fought Yoshimura in the past. We only see him at the end of the original Tokyo Ghoul, where he comes to see the comatose Shinohara, and that's about it. Mikito Uri is Kuki Uri's father, and he was also a character from the past. He was actually the investigator who defeated Donato Popora and arrested him, saving Amon in the process. This is the main reason why Donato despises our Uri in the story of Tokyo Ghoul Re. Mikito would pass away in a battle against the owl after sacrificing himself for his team to get away, and this would cause our Uri to despise the characters who were on his team when this took place. With that said, he does seem to be very strong, but also a plot device to stitch up a lot of the loose ends of the series. Last for honorable mentions, we have Tsuneyoshi Washu. This was the chairman and the head honcho of the entire CCG before it went to shit. He was also both Arima and Furuta's father. We don't ever see him fight, but we do know that he's pretty powerful, as he was the one to originally defeat and capture Roma, the triple S Kakuja Ghoul. He also perpetuated a lot of the non-consensual reproduction of the half-human, half-ghoul children like Arima at the time of the series. So yeah, he's a terrible person that all of his children hate. Despite this, we don't know much about him, and we never see him fight. Now at number 1, we have the Reaper, the undefeated investigator of the CCG himself, Arima Kisho. Arima was an extremely stoic person who was able to face and cut down anything in his way with relative ease, hence is why he's referred to as the Reaper. Arima, coming from the Sunlit Garden, was also gifted with half-ghoul, half-human genetics and trained since birth to become an agent of V. In the original series, he's the one to put down Kaneki and end the story, but we come to find out and read that he actually rehabilitated Kaneki into an investigator and manipulated him with good intent, with the purpose of Kaneki succeeding him as the One-Eyed King, the hope of all ghoul kind. We also find out that Arima, like Furuta, despised the Washu for giving him the life that he has of being a killing machine and nothing more, so he made a plan with Eto, the One-Eyed Owl, in order to cultivate someone powerful enough to change things in the world. He eventually takes his own life after throwing his fight against Kaneki to make sure this plan goes through, because if someone was able to defeat him in this new spread, the world would be turned upright. Kaneki does choose to succeed him in his plans, and eventually does everything that Arima wanted him to do as the One-Eyed King. Arima and Kaneki had a pretty tight father and son relationship, as he expressed his gratitude for Kaneki being something that he was finally able to leave behind, rather than take from the world. Arima is usually hailed as one of, if not the most well-written character in the last decade. Arima is a half-human, giving him enhanced stats without the Ghoul abilities, but even amongst the half-humans, he's a prodigy. It's even to a point where he's described as the embodiment of God's favoritism. Arima has 3 extremely powerful kaneki at his disposal as well. Narukami is a blade with the ability to change its form into a cannon that can launch lightning bolts. Ixa is a lance that has the ability to change into a shield or remote activation in the form of launching multiple piercing tentacles from beneath his opponents. And lastly, Owl, the only triple S kaneki we've seen in the entire series, which is a great sword with the ability to launch out many shards of condensed RC cells and a remote activation of launching a massive blade beneath his opponents, similar to Ixa. Arima has been able to put down every single character who stood in his way with relative ease when intending to defeat them, including Eto herself. When you see him, you run. With that said, that covers about all special investigators in the series. If you enjoy content such as this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out. And of course, thank you all for watching so much. The support means the world to me.